So, Rich, thanks for joining me today on this. And yeah, looking forward to getting your thoughts on a few topics. But I suppose it'd be helpful if you could just give a quick overview and an introduction to yourself.
Yeah, cheers, Mike. So yeah, I'm Rich Merrett. I'm the head of AI at Bellrock. I have been working in AI and innovation for the last 5 years or so, and prior to that, spent a lot of time working in voice technology. So I've been on the precipice of AI for over a decade now, from kind of looking at how ways that we can innovate and use the technology to really kind of help advance either people in their personal lives or businesses across how they work.
Really interesting. No, I appreciate that, and thanks for the overview there. I think one of the questions I had for that around that, as you said, you've been sort of on the precipice of AI for a decade or so. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of companies that have been in AI experimentation mode, but very few that are becoming, I suppose, AI native or having an AI first culture. I suppose, in your opinion, what do you think separating those companies that are generating sort of real value, measurable value from AI versus those that are stuck in sort of pilot mode?
So I think the key difference, and I think in your question you used the absolute correct word, it's culture. And it's the real thing that I found that has really differentiated is the way that people both take AI from a governance perspective, but also take AI from an empowerment and empowering kind of teams to understand it. So from that government perspective, kind of almost embracing the innovation. Teams can be slightly risk averse. You think about a lot of DPOs and a lot of infosec directors or whatever else. They kind of their instinct is to go, this is quite dangerous. We're giving our data to various different things, but there's lots of things you can put in place. And I think one of the most valuable things is the discussion of people. With people, so having those discussions with, so I set up governance committees. There's where we have DPOs, we have legal leads, we have infosec, we have the technology leads, and we have those people that are experts in AI and data to be able to really kind of bring forward that conversation and address the risk together to understand the benefits and the disadvantages of any particular tool, or jumping from that, oh, we're experimenting, we're playing with AI a bit, to this is something we're going to have in full production. I think the other side of that is empowering colleagues, and it's something that I feel really passionately about. I've done a lot of work with AI champions programs in the past, and it's kind of, if you empower the workforce, then you've kind of really you've enabled them to not only understand what AI is and understand the kind of the art of the possible, if you like, but you're enabling them to not feel threatened. Like, if you're showing them exactly what can be done, you can also show that this isn't this big scary looming thing that is going to take our jobs and all of that jazz that gets thrown around quite regularly. It's something that can be used to really enhance you and benefit you. There's cost implications with that, because the minute you start showing people tools, you've got to they will all want access and they want to do stuff. You don't want the AI, the shadow AI usage, or the grey AI usage, whatever you call it. But that's where the governance comes back in. So it's almost a
Yeah,
bit of a full circle.
that's really interesting. And you mentioned sort of AI tooling there. I feel like every day, every week, there's something new and shiny on the market, and it feels almost impossible to stay on top of. Um, how do you, or how should AI leaders approach AI tooling, or I suppose that build versus buy versus partner decision?
So I think when it comes to build versus buy, I think for small stuff, I'm fully on board with the build, and then but for larger projects, I'm more of a let's buy this, because the risk is then almost shared. But I think it comes back to that kind of the governance piece, right? It's like, what is the risk appetite of the business? Is it are you willing to give your data over to a model, or do you want to host it? And it's about how do you get that piece where you understand how to utilize AI in a way that is safe, but within your own risk, kind of, your own risk appetite.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. And are you finding that organizations differentiate between sort of like internal versus leveraging broader ecosystems? Is it always, do you feel like it's always down to sort of like risk appetite? I suppose budget often will come into it as well.
Yeah, I think budget it does play a massive part, especially when you think about the tooling, because you want to give, you can't give everyone access to ChatGPT. Now, the argument that I have used a few times, and it's yet to be successful, but is, you would not question as a CFO or someone in charge of budgets, you wouldn't question whether you would include Excel or Outlook or whatever your provider of choice is for your email. Like you wouldn't even question that. Yet
No.
we question why we would have AI and where the value is there. Now, I can pretty much guarantee that everyone that sees this does not necessarily use Excel to its fullest of its capabilities. Now, not
No.
everyone is going to use Claude
I
or
certainly don't.
ChatGPT or whatever else. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't. But you'll be lucky if you see an if statement on one of my spreadsheets. But you don't utilize the fullest extent of Excel, yet we expect to have it as part of our package. Why do we not think the same thing with AI tooling? So whether that be something like ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude or whatever else. So that's one side of it when you're kind of thinking about the costing. I think the other side very much boils down to kind of what is your use case? Like, is it a use case where you need to, and what is the expertise in the business? So is it a use case where you kind of need to think about, we want to be able to replicate this on a regular basis. We want it to be consistent. Is this something that we actually need to build, or is this something that we can empower teams to do themselves? One of the things that I mentioned, I've mentioned previously about the importance of empowerment, and one of the things that I feel that really works quite well with champions programs is you not only you training up colleagues to be better at AI and understand AI, but also if you give them the power of a tool, now that tool could be something like Replit, it might be quite an expensive tool, or it could be NAN. Again, it can add up, the costs can ramp up. But you give them access to those tools, you show them how to use those properly and safely. They can then they can then take those use cases with their colleagues, and almost as opposed to top-down training, you've almost got that horizontal training, and that really, I think it really not only just kind of encourages kind of collaboration and innovation, but also it means that people do feel safer because it's more cost effective because you're not giving tooling to everyone. You're giving it to a select individual that you're making feel really important, but also you're empowering. It's a word I come back to, and that is I think a really powerful way of getting people access to the tooling at a reduced cost.
Yeah, it's quite interesting as well, because I think having these champions and empowering these champions in different business areas is quite key, because I suppose they're the ones that will have the domain experience of their business area, and once they understand AI, start to come up with the potential use cases of how it can automate or make efficient, because it's quite difficult for an AI professional, AI specialist to come in, understand the business to that level of depth, to then start to generate potential use cases. So having leaning on them for that sort of knowledge of the business and working with them is, I suppose that's where you'll start to get the value and start to identify the use cases within the business.
That's exactly it. I run workshops, and I say to people in those workshops that you are the experts. The reason that we want to do workshops, we want to do hackathons with individual teams, like not in the traditional hackathon sense when you've got a bunch of techies in a room. You want subject matter experts. You want to do those kind of events because I'm never going to understand what the actual pain points are. I'm never going to understand. I could do all the discovery in the world, but actually, the people that are doing the job are the ones that actually understand it better. So you empower them with some of the tools and the ability to kind of solutionize themselves. Sometimes it's more beneficial with oversight. Obviously, you don't just kind of let people run free. There's levels of oversight from people that are experts in the domain to be able to understand and guide.
Interesting. No, that's really interesting, and an interesting approach to empowering a company to be more AI focused. I suppose something that's quite interesting for me, actually. So my background in recruitment started in the world of data. And there's a lot of companies, I've seen this a lot recently, a lot of companies are doing AI, but I suppose their data foundations, there's sort of a lack of maturity. In your view, how much is data maturity actually required to start unlocking, meaningful AI? And where do you see sort of like leaders, do they tend to over or underestimate the importance of I suppose data maturity, data readiness?
I think people underestimate the importance. I think there's two arms of the doing AI as to whether or not data is important. I think for that the low-hanging fruit, as it were, some of these simple kind of things that you can empower individuals to do, the smaller transformation projects that they'll have impact on productivity, they might have impact on efficiency, on quality. They don't require data as much. They require subject matter expertise.
Yeah.
If you want a transformation project that is going to properly transform your business with the use of AI, you need a very, very good foundation of a data set foundation to be able to do that with at all. Now, the last two companies I've worked at have had amazing data teams. Right, Bellrock's got an incredible data team. Where I worked before had an incredible data team, and I cannot understate, if you like, the importance of having good data. If you don't have good data, you are not going to get the results that you need. Now, that could be because you can't run a machine learning model on something that's not there, or something that is rubbish because you're going to skew it too much. Or it could be that just you need that data to be able to have a decent understanding of what the problem actually is, or how to solve that problem. We won an AI award for innovation at my last place, and that would not have been possible without having the data foundations that kind of backed everything up. We had that to understand what good looked like in terms of call quality. We had the information from the data lake to fully understand what that business was, what was the sector. We had data on our colleagues' sales performance to be able to understand what was beneficial for them, or what worked really well for them, and where they were successful. Now, all of those three bits of data were required to have a successful project, and I think that's when you want a big hitting, headline grabbing, firework setting off type of AI project, you need that data to be able to be there. But you can do a lot of AI without the good data. You've got that subject matter expertise that's able to kind of help with some of those smaller projects.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. One thing, so I've as I said, I've recruited in the world of data for a little over a decade, and there's this sort of age-old argument whether data should be something that sits within technology under a CTO, equivalent, or whether data should be, its own standalone business area that services different areas. It sounds like potentially AI has created another argument for it to be closer to technology, whether that sort of sits within it or, very, very closely in a lot of collaboration. But depending on who you speak to, whether that be a CTO who wants oversight of it versus a head of data or a CDO, they want it completely separate. Where do you stand on that out of interest?
I stand very much in that they should be working together in the same team camp. I think I think having data and AI, or data and technology, sitting alongside each other so that you can almost turn around and speak to someone on the desk next to you is so much more beneficial than kind of having to go through a system in a different team to be able to talk to someone, and you end up too siloed. It's something that you can't do a lot of these projects now without it. Therefore, why would you separate them? I think I've worked in where I work now. At Bellrock, we've got the digital team has the AI team, it has the data team, both sat within it. Where I worked previously, they had data scientists working with the AI team, and data team sat under that same technology function. So it really is beneficial to have them working side by side.
Yeah, it's interesting because 10 years ago, when I started, data was always under technology, and then there was a real push from, I suppose, people within the world of data to have it separate. And then I'm seeing slowly but surely that being brought in. Most companies now, their data engineering capability isn't in a separate data function, it's in technology, but like their, I suppose, business facing data roles like insight and data science and analytics is. So it's interesting to see it's potentially coming full circle really in the last 10 years. Interesting. I suppose from my perspective, one thing I'm seeing as a recruiter, there's a huge focus on hiring AI talent, specifically with commercial experience. How you define that is depends on the individual, right? But you've touched on a lot about broader AI literacy across the business. How do you balance, or what's your advice to other leaders? Sort of, how do you balance bringing in specialist capability versus sort of raising that overall baseline of knowledge and within the business?
So I think you can't raise the overall baseline of knowledge if you haven't got the expertise in house to start with. There are some amazing training companies out there, but I think there's also it's good to have people in the business that you can talk to and ask. And I think A sentence I've said, I've been at Bellrock now for 2 months, and I think the sentence I've said probably more often than I've ever said before is all of these AI solutions, it's a 20% technology issue and it's an 80% people issue. Like you need the people here to be able to understand how it's all working, and it's a people transformation project. So it's not just excuse me, it's not just having the AI knowledge, and that is certainly important, but it's been able to think outside the box of it, strategize in a way that you potentially you've not had to strategize before, and be able to communicate really, really well is a really, really important with AI, because it is such a topic that does, it does scare some people. It does, people are afraid that, jobs are going to be taken at some point, or at least jobs are going to be done very differently to the way that they potentially be trained, could have been doing something for 30, 40 years. So you need people that are able to communicate well. So you need people that are able to kind of have that human interaction. But I think some of the things that I find when I'm kind of talking to people about, or when I'm looking for AI talent, is how do they approach certain things? Do they understand that AI is different? If there's not an understanding, if you want to approach an AI development project like a software development project, then you're not the right person for the job. You need to understand the differences and the nuances with AI, and the fact that it is, it's an ever evolving thing. Models will be deprecated, new models will be released, and it's not like releasing a software patch. It's you need that. It's a complete. You might have completely different outputs based on what you were doing. So therefore, you need to have plans in place to be able to re-engage with subject matter experts, to retest different things, and it's a very different approach. And so you need people that are adaptable, and you need people that are willing to kind of see outside the box, and then also be able to strategize in a very different way to previously, because you want to be able to kind of essentially make the most out of this technology, and not just do the thing that someone's doing exactly the same but a bit faster. Is there a way of reimagining the process? You want to get from A to B. You don't necessarily have to go in that straight line that everyone's always been going in. There could be a different route that might not seem obvious on the outset, but actually it means that you're going to get more done out of it, because you might hit a couple of more different kind of points of interest on that journey, and be able to get more out of it.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned something interesting there. The roadblocks or challenges with AI is usually 20% technical, 80% sort of cultural, people challenge. I think the focus is always the other way around.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people I
is.
speak to. It's always about build, get technical skills in, and and then often AI projects, whatever they look like, are done very siloed and almost like hidden away from the rest of the business. And I suppose that kind of adds to the fear monger in a way. Like you said, there is an element of fear about AI at the minute. Will it take our job? Will it change our job? People have been doing their roles for 30, 40 years in a certain way, and I understand that. And when it's done that way, where it is very sort of siloed and separate, and it's and they're bringing skills externally and not upskilling, it does sort of add to that sort of fear, I suppose. Whereas your approach is, instead of build, it's empower, and sort of across the business essentially.
Yeah, this is a tool, right? And it's a tool that can really help people. I think where I've seen real success in businesses is where you have an AI function, whether that's an AI team. Obviously, I have an AI team myself. I worked in AI teams previously. Where that exists as a function that is almost, you're almost in a really privileged position, I find, with AI in an AI team, because you're able to do things that almost no other team in the business can do, because you're going and you're talking to everyone certainly in the way that I've handled things, is you're able to go talk to everyone in the business. You're known by everyone as the people that are trying to solve the problems, and that really does help, and it changes the dynamic within a business. But being able to show everyone that we are embedded, we are part of the organization, we're an umbrella department, if you like, as opposed to, or an umbrella team, as opposed to just someone that's sitting out on the side that's kind of used to working technology and now does a few things with AI. It really does make a massive difference.
Yeah. How do you, in that circumstance, how do you prioritize? Because if you're in part of a large company with lots of different business areas, sales, marketing, everything in between, and like you said, your team sits as like an umbrella, almost like an internal consultancy in a way to all of those
That's
areas.
exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you prioritize? Do you try and bring them all up at the same level in terms of efficiency and knowledge, or how do you go about that?
I mean, in terms of so there's two arms of that. There's how do you do the empowerment, and there's how do you kind of work out what the projects are. And I think when you're working out the projects, there's very much there's a very simple equation of impact, effort divided by impact, and coming up with a score there, but also working out what is the ROI, what is what is the kind of the closeness to the goals of the business and that kind of thing. Now, ROI doesn't always have to be like a bread and butter ROI in terms of kind of monetary value, but that having that prioritization and then some t-shirt sizing, is this going to be a complex build? Is this going to be something that's just relatively straightforward? Putting those together on an old-fashioned spreadsheet. This is where my Excel comes in. Putting them on a spreadsheet and being able to essentially rank by score to work out what is potentially the most impactful, and then taking that to a strategic board, discussing with the executives, with the MDs across the business, like this is where we see this as the priority. From a business perspective, does this align, or is this way off? If this does align, then we crack on with top and we work down. But there's also, you've got almost two different kind of types of project within that. You've got your simple wins, and then you've got your big strategic wins. So I try and do no more than one or two big strategic initiatives every kind of 6 months or so. And then that low-hanging fruit, I mean, I've got a team of AI graduates that are amazing, that are able to do that low-hanging fruit, those low-hanging fruit projects that have real impact for individuals. And then when you have that empowerment, that also means that you've got people working in their teams as well to be able to generate stuff. And part of the beauty of that empowerment is you have sharing sessions, and you're able to, because you're giving people a privilege, you're giving people that tool, you're helping to educate them. Part of that reciprocal relationship is that they have to share what they're doing with everybody, and kind of, so we can see how it's benefiting the business, and it helps drive ideas. So I think that's kind of a really important way of doing it. And then obviously empowerment is super important as well, and being able to do that democratically across the organization is something that I think without you're setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah, you mentioned there about like low-hanging fruit. I've always found that is, especially when you're maybe potentially dealing with a lot of change within a business, you do get people, stakeholders that, even if the change is positive, there's resistance, hesitation. And I think often the quicker wins, the low-hanging fruit, shows some of the really quick turnaround capability, and it's quite good for winning people over, so that they're bought in for the longer term, bigger picture transformation projects that do take time before they start to see a return on investment and sort of the value, don't they?
We try and turn those low-hanging fruit, we try and turn those projects around within 10 days. Because that does show it. You're right, it completely shows the speed at which you can do this stuff, but also it shows that you can have it, you've been able to see, the idea is still relatively fresh in someone's mind, that you have an idea on a Monday, and by 2 Fridays time you've got something that's sat there on their desk that they can play with. That really does show that it shows people that this is something that can be done quickly at pace. I think with that though, there's a culture across a lot of businesses where if you're doing a project and it doesn't work, that you see that as a failure. It's like, oh right, okay, well this has failed, this is horrible, like the world is going to end. I think one of the things with AI and with the ability to innovate as fast as we can now is failure is very much a success, because you've tried something out, and because you can do it so quickly, you could have spent back in the old world, that old world of 2 years ago, but back in the old world, you could have spent weeks doing discovery, weeks trying to implement something, and then that, and I can see why then you'd be thinking, oh, okay, well, no, this is actually a failure. But now, because you can do it in a 2-week window, like, you failed, but you've learned so much about what the capabilities are, what you can do within the business. And the beauty of it is, because the technology is moving at such a pace, you can come back to it in 6 months, a year, and see if, and just give it another spin it up again and see if you can try if it will work now. But that failure is very much success in this new world of AI being able to iterate fast.
Yeah, no, we talked a lot about like ROI there, and I suppose whenever I speak to business leaders that are trying to make some sort of transformation into the world of AI, and they obviously they're talking to me typically because they're looking to either hire their first AI leader like yourself to help come in and guidance. But when I talk about like outcomes, the business cases are always focused on like efficiency and cost reduction, which might be why failure is still seen as like a failure rather than the win, because obviously they lose some efficiency and they lose some cost by that project. But I suppose, where do you see, I suppose, the next sort of iteration of AI driven value creation? Do you think that people should be rethinking, or business leaders should be rethinking how they measure ROI with AI specifically?
Absolutely. I think in terms of how we define ROI, I think, all right, typically we do look at a pound note value. I think in the world where it can do so much, I think that is a mistake. I'd argue that one of the projects that I think has driven, I've driven projects that have had a very decent ROI in terms of that pound note value. But I think for me, one of the most valuable projects I ever worked on was where that ROI was not monetary, it was risk reduction. And it had gone from being able to do supplier due diligence, using AI to be able to do supplier due diligence. Now, that previously, you got maybe 3 in a month, because it's a labor intensive process to be able to go through and actually do the due diligence properly, to be able to do like 80 over the space of like 3 months. Now that makes a massive difference, because you've massively reduced your risk as a business. And if you're reducing the risk, from if you talk to DPOs, they'll be very happy about that.
Yeah.
So I think there's reframing it to be what actually is the benefit to the business, as opposed to what is the dosh, if you like. So I think things like risk, things like quality, the fact you can give a better service to your clients, or a better service, and whether your clients are internal clients or they're external clients, you'll be able to provide a better service because of the quality that you can do. You can save time, and even to an extent of being able to improve quality of life for your employees. Now, the CFOs aren't always a massive fan of being able to go, all right, rather than that someone's working till 8 o'clock, they're able to work till 5. But if they're able to work till 5, they can go to the gym, they can pick their kids up from school, they can go take their kids to swimming, right?
Helps with retention of staff.
Exactly, like retention sticks around, and that falls into your world of really kind of boosting up why people want to work at some like a place. So and you then link that back into all the empowerment stuff that you're doing. If you follow some of the stuff we've talked about, you've made someone not only have a much better work-life balance, but also you've set them up for whatever future role that they do decide to go on to later on. Because we fully expect someone to be coming to a business trained on how to use email. There's going to come a time, probably before the end of this decade, where you're expecting people to understand exactly how to use AI effectively. And
I feel like soon we'll be hiring people that'll they'll have their own agents that run alongside them, that they work with day to day and things like that. I think that's the next the next part of your question about what's the future look like. I think part of that is agents as a service, and I think we will be having either having our own agents that we built ourselves, or having our own agents that we buy, a financial agent called Penny or whatever else, but you have those agents that help you and do specific tasks, and we work as people within the world of business. We work alongside those agents, so they can do some of the the grunt work, and then we can do some of the more heavy lifting. And there's arguments for and against that in terms of how we don't have that switch off time. But actually, if you're improving your work-life balance, then you do get to switch off a bit earlier, and you get to spend time with your family afterwards. Yeah. So the challenge for sort of individuals like you is how you manage those senior leaders on those sort of, I suppose, slightly harder to quantify ROI, because I think cost is always something to look at, because it's a lot easier to quantify, isn't it? It's a lot easier to say we've saved X amount, or we've made you X amount. But like I said, retention is quite a long-term thing, and again comes back to the importance of data and analytics around the business, as well as AI to help sort of report on those things that are slightly more difficult to quantify and show.
Absolutely, and it is a real challenge, right? Let's not sugarcoat things. People are so for decades, centuries, people have been measuring the value of business with money. And actually now there are slightly different ways to do it. It is not going to be something that we're able to do overnight. It's going to be a more of a long burn. But I think that is part of the role of AI experts, AI leaders, is to be able to kind of help show the actual benefits in other ways, and kind of be a bit goes back to what I was saying earlier about being kind of inventive and kind of having to have that little bit of thinking outside the box on ways that you can show and do things.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it sounds like it's AI is sort of empowering creativity in a lot of ways, isn't it? By the sound of it, being that ability to think outside the box and tackle business challenges and business problems in different ways.
Exactly. I mean, it empowers all of us to be able to do things that we've never been able to do previously. And it gives us, because the other thing from a human element perspective, we as humans inherently don't like being wrong, and we don't like saying something where we might feel a little bit on edge, especially those of us of kind of the millennial generation that, we don't want to speak up and be told that we're not right. AI gives us a bit of a soundboard to be able to kind of practice, almost go, is this actually a good idea? Am I thinking anything is worth it here? And then, there's arguments for, for AI, blowing smoke and all of that sort of stuff. But, if you tell it, you prompt it correctly, and you ask it to be able to give you like the proper feedback, then you're able to have, quite a grown-up conversation with it to be able to say, is this actually a good idea or not? And then have the confidence to go forward with that to some senior leaders. So I think that it also really does, go back to the word empowerment, it really does empower us all to be able to do things that we've never really been able to do before.
Absolutely. No, it's really interesting. And Rich, I can't thank you enough for your time today on this, because it's been really interesting and enlightening, and to understand more about you and your role within a business on I'll use the word empowerment. I think it should be the name of this, the title of this, because I think it's obviously something that's really, really key. And it sounds like it's the difference between having, transforming a business from, wanting to do AI to being truly AI native across the business, and empowering individuals and giving them the knowledge, the tools, the guidelines to do that, because then, as you say, they can leverage their business knowledge, and they're the ones that will be able to have the impact within the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you so much for your time, Mike. It's been a lovely conversation.
And you.